You guys know how I feel about comic book movies. Avengers Infinity War, it's a hit or miss. Now, I'm not saying I hated it. I'm not saying I loved it. I actually really liked it. Just the thing is, this movie is so much harder to critique because it's not your typical movie. It doesn't really follow that Marvel formula I've been complaining about over the past year. It's more so an event, like an actual comic book crossover. There's really no character development with all these like 30 plus people in this movie, and it's more so just little subplots that all combine for this one major event that is Avengers Infinity War. And does it work? I think it does. I think it works very nicely for what they were given, because this is such a hard task of a movie, just in general. It's not easy to balance all of these great characters that have had so much development leading up to this one main event. So how does Marvel balance that, you might ask? Because that's kind of a concerning thing. Well, I think they do it pretty nicely. Though some characters do get way more spotlight than others, they still give some people arcs while others are more so in the background. Some characters I wish were more in the front lines, but maybe in the next one they'll get more. You never know with Marvel. Now, the characters that really shine in this movie are Tony Stark, Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, Gamora, and Thanos. And Thor, I'm sorry. But they really have the main arcs of the movie, and they're the ones that you really follow throughout this narrative. And all of them are handled very nicely. I think Thanos is one of the better villains in Marvel. Though I still think he's not the best villain. I personally believe that Killmonger from Black Panther, though I'm not the biggest fan of Black Panther, he is most definitely the best MCU villain to date. Reason being is I can actually agree and side with Killmonger. Like, I could actually picture somebody rising up and backing up Killmonger in his efforts. With Thanos, you do understand where he's coming from, and you understand his motivation and why he's doing all this, but someone with a normal mind really wouldn't side with him. And that's where I'm getting at. People are saying that this is the most spectacular Marvel movie. It's really not. It's a good Marvel movie, but it's not the best. But what I think they did with Thanos was probably the best they could have done with how many people they are juggling in this movie. And Josh Brolin really sells it as him. He does a great performance, and the CG for him is nearly perfect in every scene. There are some scenes that aren't the best. Those are more so the faraway shots. But overall, he just looks fantastic. And the visual effects as a whole in this movie are just amazing. You see, with like Black Panther and Spider-Man Homecoming, they looked really bad at some situations, especially Black Panther. That entire final fight was one of the most PS3 things I've ever seen. This movie's visual effects, I barely even noticed if I wasn't trying to find them. There was probably only a couple instances where I thought, that's a visual effect, that looks really bad. And that really pertains only to Thanos' like goons, his like mini video game bosses below him. They looked really bad in some instances because they're really not the forefront of the story. They're just kind of the ones doing his job. Some of them looked good in some situations, but in others they just looked awful. I remember there was this one close-up of one of them, and it was probably the fakest thing I've ever seen in my life. But other than that, all the green screen, the settings, the planets, all the effects of fighting and the suits, and just other moments here and there, But it was just really well done. It's like they took their best VFX artists and just plucked them into this movie, and thankfully it worked out. Now, the major concern with this movie is the runtime. The runtime is over 2.5 hours long. And that's pretty concerning because Marvel usually sticks around to the 2 hour mark. And 2.5 hours is a long time for a movie. And you really have to keep your audience invested if you're trying to keep them to stick around and be interested for the full 2.5. Avengers does that pretty well. They make these little subplots. There's about 3 or 4 subplots in this movie that aren't really subplots. They're more so really integral plot lines that all sort of conjoin together. And now some I do care more about than others, but they still all have equal value to them. And I feel as if that they handle them very nicely, except for one, which I feel as if could have been chopped down a bit, and another one could have gotten a little more. It's just great overall. The pacing doesn't really drag at moments, and I feel as if the script and the editing room really did a nice job with this. Now, going back to what I said earlier about this being more of an event than an actual movie. You see, a typical movie usually has that 3-act structure, This really doesn't. It is more so a sequence of events that all coincide. That's basically what it is. It is literally a comic book crossover. Now, if you're someone who has never watched a Marvel movie going into this movie, you're not going to like it. You're not really going to get anything that's going on. You may understand a little bit because the story is pretty easy to understand, but you're going to not know past events that kind of are important that lead up to this. But there is some entertainment value here. I highly recommend not watching this if you've never seen a Marvel movie. For it being an event, it does it really well. It really serves the fans what they wanted. And it's very satisfying, I agree. The action is pretty good for the most part. Russo Brothers action, I'm not the biggest fan of, though I do love Winter Soldier. Civil War's action was really Bourne-esque. It did it okay, but I feel as if it could have been shot better, more wide. It was more so close-ups. It's kind of the same as Civil War. It's pretty close up, but I do think the action is pretty decent here. But with how they handle Thanos in this movie with the gauntlet, I thought they were just going to go, oh, he can punch harder or he can shoot lasers. No, they went all out with him. He's like throwing rocks at him. He's using spells. It's madness. And I'm loving that Marvel is not holding back these powers he has. And I'm very glad that they're having fun with it, because it's way more satisfying than just another big bad villain who can punch hard. I'm looking at you, DC. But for this movie, like I said, it as an event, it's pretty solid. It does the fan service well. It's a great entertainment piece. But as a film, it's not typical. It's not that cohesive because these plot lines, some of them don't even conjoin, and some of them just run on. It's really weird, but the part 2 will hopefully make this movie better as a movie and not an event. Because this movie feels an event, but maybe the next movie will make this movie feel more complete. You get what I'm saying there? I hope you do, because it makes sense in my mind. Now, the humor. Marvel's humor is usually very good. Guardians' humor is great. Spider-Man's humor was great. This movie has some great one-liners and some great jokes mixed in there, but some of them, they just fall flat. I feel as if the movie could have toned down just a bit with the humor. Just a bit. Where I know James Gunn wrote all the Guardians dialogue, and all of it was pretty funny for the most part, But I don't feel as if it tonally mixed well with what the Russo brothers were going for with this movie. This movie has more so of a darker tone compared to the rest of the MCU, more in line with the Civil Wars or the Winter Soldiers. Though the Russo brothers' Guardians dialogue, it doesn't really mix that great, but it still works because it's Marvel. It's not like you're throwing Shazam into Batman v Superman. Like, that would not work unless you made him such a dark character. It works here, but it could have been executed better. The acting is really good all around. I think Chris Pratt gives his best performance as Star-Lord. Robert Downey Jr. is great as Tony Stark yet again. And Josh Brolin as Thanos, as I said, he's great. Just all the performances, very good, like you would expect them to be, because Marvel really has perfect castings. And I will stand by that till the end of time, because the casting so far for this movie these movies is just, it's great. I mean, all these, I don't see anyone else playing these characters. Some plot lines were just bad, I think. Like, what I said earlier was they all work well, but there are some little, like, subplots that mix in with a plot line that are kind of bad. It kind of pertains to Vision and Scarlet Witch, which I think is just awful. It came out of nowhere to me. And there's some other ones where some characters barely get any dialogue, and you're supposed to care at some moments, and you really don't because they haven't really grown. Marvel's really trusting you to know these people already, which is why I say don't watch it if you haven't seen anything beforehand, because you're not going to care about over half this cast, because this really focuses on some major players, and the other people you're really not going to bother with if you haven't seen a prior film. Because you can't really cram that much development for 30 plus characters in 2.5 hours. That's like impossible. So I see the struggles they had, but I think they did it well enough for me to enjoy it. The only real issue I have with the movie, which isn't that big of an issue, it's that I didn't really take much away from this movie as like a message. It's more so of an entertainment than something to say. I didn't learn anything from this movie other than where this universe is gonna go. It's done fairly nicely, though it's just they could have plucked something in there. Now, there's this one plot line at the end of the movie where they have that giant alien fight. I really wish that the movie would have more balls to, do something different than a giant alien invasion again. And it didn't really have any tension to me. The movie with tension with Thanos is very good. I'm really afraid of him. They really sell that he is this powerful being. But when they're fighting this horde of aliens, you could care less because there's no tension. You don't know. They're just thrusted into this fight, and you don't know their powers. You don't know how strong they are. You just see the Avengers just destroy them, and you don't get anything out of it. You're not worried about them. You're more so worried about Thanos in this plot line rather than the one plot line you're watching where they're going to be okay, because you're not afraid of these aliens. Thanos is the real threat in this movie. That's why I feel like the third act lost a bit of tension. Not the part with Thanos, the part with Earth. That's what I'm saying. When Thanos is on screen, lots of tension. I feel it. I'm afraid for the Avengers. But when he's off screen and they're fighting just, his goons or the aliens in Wakanda, I could care less, because that's really where I would fall asleep if I didn't really care about the movie, because there's no tension. But yeah, overall, I think Avengers Infinity War was very good. I liked it a lot. I didn't love it. I still think this isn't that cohesive of a film yet, but I do think that when part two rolls around, my opinion on this will change just a bit because it will feel more complete rather than I don't know where this is going. You know what I'm saying? This is more so of a crossover event rather than an actual movie. I've watched Marvel for 10 years now, and I've really enjoyed all these movies, whether there are some that are really bad and then there are some that are really good. And I'm not afraid to say if they're bad or not. I try to be as unbiased as I can, and hopefully this video kind of seems that way. Now, obviously, I love that this is actually happening, and I enjoyed it. I think it's a great crossover. But as a film, which is what I'm judging it as, it really kind of falls flat in some of those instances. Now, for my grade out of 10, I don't know what to give it. I'm leaning in the 7 range, a 7, 7.5. That's where I'm going right now. It could change after I watch it again. It could go up to an 8. It's around a 7. That's what I'm going to say right now. I'm really not final on it. I really enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure you guys enjoyed it too because this movie's making a boatload of money right now. It just broke the record for opening weekend. I cannot wait to see what they do with part 2 because, man, this ending was crazy. I'm really excited for what the future has in store. But with all that being said, the MCU is better than the DCEU.